Thank you for joining us on the RTO Superhero Podcast. Elevate your organization's potential by becoming a part of our superhero membership community. Gain exclusive access to resources, training, and support, all tailored for RTO professionals. Visit our website to join and start your journey towards compliance excellence today.
Welcome back to the RTO Superhero Podcast, where we're going to be covering all things that are important right now when it comes to the training industry, and in particular right now is the issues that we have around government funding around Australia. And I have with me co-host today, Lauren Hollows, who has had many experiences in this area with her clients and what she's heard within the industry. So let's get to it, Lauren. Welcome to the RTO Superhero Podcast, and let's get started. What's been your experience so far with regards to government funding around Australia?
Yeah, thank you for having me back. Look, I mean, government funding is such an interesting space. It's incredibly challenging for RTOs. It requires so many additional processes and forms and knowledge of systems and things like that. So hats off to any RTO that manages multiple state funding contracts, right? It's very interesting to watch all of the ebbs and flows that occur in our industry. And, like Queensland came up last year for funding. So obviously we had a couple of RTOs reaching out to us and going, hey, can you help us put together these things? So we started looking at all the requirements. And last year, in order to get through round one, you had to have delivered 10 qualifications in that space in Queensland, in that qualification, in order to be able to apply. So we had a couple of RTOs that didn't meet the requirements, and they were like, well, we'll put it forward anyway. We had one RTO that had delivered the qualification in Queensland and had multiple completions, but it was for international students. And so, Queensland was like, no, not eligible, doesn't count, right? We had another client who had delivered the same program in far regional WA to a Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nations cohort. They had 80% completion rates, right? Huge completion rates for job seeker cohorts, huge completion rates for regional cohorts. And again, massive. Just didn't count because it hadn't been done in Queensland. Vet DSS programs, so vets delivered secondary school programs with 95% completion rates, not interested because it wasn't delivered in Queensland. And we were like, yeah, but we want to bring this to Queensland. Like, you can see we can do this, and we can do this well. And we get great completion outcomes. And it was like, no.
Wouldn't you like the same results?
Right? Like, if I'm an employer and someone's coming to me and going, okay, I want to look at who I'm going to be giving out my funding to, who am I going to pay for this particular service? And I've got someone that comes to me and they go, well, I've delivered, we got funded for 100 places and we got 20 completions last year. And then I've got this guy that goes, well, I got given 100 places in WA and I completed 75% of them. Who am I going to pick, right? I'm going to pick the people that have got the good outcomes and be like, well, there's obviously something that you guys are doing there. If you can replicate that here, then absolutely, like, you're going to get the better outcomes. You're going to give me better bang for my buck, right?
What's going on in these government departments when they can't, like, as entrepreneurs, we go, yeah, I know exactly where I want to invest my money.
Yeah. What am I going to get for it? Like, if I'm going to give everyone $5,000 and someone's going to give me, all of this, and this one's going to be like, I'm going to give you this, but I'm going to give you this. I'm going to be like, I want that, right? And I think that is the problem. Is like, it's incredibly hard to set up a government funded program. And I know in our previous episode we were talking about, like, what does equitable funding look like? And, I don't know if it looks like, school choice, where we go, okay, well, every student gets $10,000 to go and spend on a vet qualification, right? And I think we've seen in the past how that can be rorted. So I understand the challenges of setting up a government funding program that is going to be equitable, that is going to be, like nothing's rot proof, but like that is going to have sufficient barriers in place that we can ensure quality and things, or maximize the chances of quality and things like that. But I think that, unfortunately, because there is just a lack of understanding, and because we don't seem to do these things based on data, and every state is so adamant about running things their own way as opposed to moving to any kind of nationally harmonized system. It's the dirty word of vet funding, is that we unfortunately end up in a place whereby there's no guarantees. And so what we do see is we see a lot of, like, I've got a lot of RTO owners in their 60s that are just turning around and going, you know what, it's all too hard. It used to be that when the international market went feral, right, we could rely on traineeships and apprenticeships. Yep. Or when the traineeships and apprenticeships went feral, we could rely on, like the international market. It feels at the moment like there is just an assault and a lack of like any sort of baseline across the board, that I completely understand where RTOs come from. And there's some amazing RTOs that are out there that are now literally just going, we literally just can't rely on anyone or anything. And so therefore we have to be able to do it all. Like, we've got to be able to have a bit of fee for service and a bit of government funding across a couple of different places and a bit of cry costs and stuff like that. And that then causes an RTO to really to run an RTO that runs multiple funding contracts, fee for service, institution-based programs, workplace programs, and cry costs. Holy Hannah.
It's hard. It's hard work.
You've got to have a massive compliance team. And I think this is why we're seeing a lot more RTOs kind of come together. And so we're seeing groups of RTOs that are operating with like 5 or 6 RTOs under like a parent company, because it's just kind of like, we can't do all of this without having some sort of, 100%. And I think we're going to continue to see a lot more of that, because for the mom and pop RTOs that do some really beautiful training, the amount of work that's associated with maintaining compliance now is just becoming to a point where it's not feasible for the vast majority of mom and pop RTOs to be able to continue to operate in that manner. You need to have a bigger company that's going to sit, on top of you, that's going to be able to help, that's going to help you to manage that sort of thing.
Particularly with the major changes that we have with the new standards, in particular when it comes to governance, continuous improvement and risk management, there is a lot more work that's going to be involved with managing that. And I can see the reason why it's been added to the standards, because it certainly will raise the quality of education, but these small RTOs, I don't know how they're going to cope with all of the management of this. And that's why we're trying to build a system that's automated. So Comply Hub is a compliance management system where it's automated and it will be able to identify risks based on the data that you put into it. I just think that's a major one. And then another side that came up for me then whilst you were talking, when it comes to how do we support equitable funding when it comes to TAFE and private RTOs. Private RTOs currently deliver 80% of the training. TAFE is 15%. So they deliver 15% of the training. Yes, the government most probably are wanting TAFE to deliver more training, but they don't have that capacity. They don't have the infrastructure. And then so they're stating, the government stating that it will be 100,000 fee-free places by 2027 each year. But we're already seeing massive cuts to private RTOs now. Like that funding, 70% of that government funding is now going to TAFE, and they don't have that infrastructure. Whereas private RTOs already have that infrastructure, they already have the outcomes, and they already have the completion ratings. That's where equitability should go. The equitable funding should go to those providers that have the outcomes, they have the completion ratings, and they have the happiness outcomes. So the where students and employers, the outcomes that the RTOs are getting is based on that data that we've received. So yeah, I definitely believe that that's where it should be equitably. What are your thoughts on that?
Looking for support from fellow RTO superheroes? Join our free Facebook groups, the RTO Community and RTO Job Board. Connect, collaborate, and stay informed with people who get it. Just search RTO Community or visit vivacity.com.au to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, New South Wales does actually track that. Every year, funded providers get a report on the satisfaction of the training that they've delivered, which is undertaken separately by New South Wales government. And if you receive a low rating, you have to have a meeting with your case manager, and you have to discuss the reason why you received that. And you kind of get told, well, you might not get your funding contract next year because your student satisfaction outcomes are not where they need to be. And every state has different measures for that. Like WA has got completion outcomes, like they've got completion benchmarks that RTOs are supposed to meet based on either or a qualification level. So again, all of this, like, different states have got different mechanisms for this. And if the states ever chose to come together and actually have a discussion on like what aspects of their funding worked and what aspects didn't, we could definitely come up with a better system. I think one of the potentials to change that is when we start to see when we see our new AVET system launch, which I think is going to be coming out next year. We've got new AVET data that's going to be coming out. As part of that, there is a 5-year plan to have all states harmonize their data, which is it's terrifying to me, and it's interesting at the same time. Having worked particularly with WA for a very long period, every time we get a new state funding system that launches, inevitably my RTOs get screwed. And like when the new system launches, you'll get something that's like, oh, but this data's dropped out, and so actually we're not going to pay you this month, and we owe you owe us $100,000, and it takes a couple of months to work out all the bugs, and like everything works out okay eventually. But anytime a new government system comes out, I have visceral trauma, right? So yeah. I'm super excited to see some harmonization of state data, because I'm hoping that will actually lead to good conversations happening between the states, and hopefully a little bit more consistency. I mean, Queensland only pays upon completion. WA pays 70% upon commencement of a unit of competency. New South Wales pays 3 payments over the course of a qualification. For RTOs that have to navigate these sorts of things, and there's actually not a lot of consultants out there that do a lot of work in the funding space, because it changes so consistently.
Yeah.
And every system is so different. Like, to try and find somebody who knows how to lodge on the Smart and Skilled e-portal, coordinate the lodgement between TAMS and, in WA, and run your prerequisite numbers in South Australia, they're just not out there. It's really hard for RTOs trying to find those people, right?
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really.
We've helped on a few different states, but it's mainly individual RTOs that we've been working with for a long time. So we understand their RTO and their background. But yeah, each time we look at a new funding, it's like, oh God, you've got to relearn everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and like there's so many different, like every single one of them has different policies and procedures. They've all got different requirements for data reporting and things like that. So I think that trying to come to some sort of, at a very minimum, getting the data for it will be great. Further to that, like in an ideal world, we would start to get some consistency, like the amount of funding that a qualification gets across states, how it can be 3 times a qualification in, South Australia as it is in, New South Wales is really strange. Like I can understand in WA, we've got loading, right? And you've got loading in a lot of the states as well. So whereby if you are providing something in the Pilbara as opposed to providing it in WA, the costs are different because like the costs are different, right? But I think we need to see like to try and get some consistency, like just a little bit more consistency in like nominal hours, and the base rates of funding for qualifications. That is probably something that needs to be handed over more to like the job skills agencies. JSCs don't currently have any control over nominal hours or any, like they don't get a lot of input on funding. And I think that that's probably where hopefully we want to see some changes over the next couple of years, because ultimately at the moment, the people who are making the calls on funding don't understand the training that's occurring. They don't understand the diversity of what happens in the industries and everything like that. And so it needs to be handed more to industry to be making those calls.
And have a better structure, a nationwide structure when it comes to government funding. I think that would be a brilliant idea, make it much easier, and comparing that data between different states and what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's part of that solution of when it comes to equitable funding is really looking at the different states and what models are working and what's not working. I definitely agree with that. Now, I want you to,
that funding, I'm just really curious. So with equitable funding, right? Does equitable funding mean like every dollar that we spend in TAFE, we should be spending an equal dollar in private? Or, would you prefer to see more of a decision on the student being able to decide where their dollar goes? Like, what does equitable funding look like? Like if we came to you tomorrow and said, right, Angela's going to decide what equitable funding looks like for our sector, and we're going to put that in place. What does that look like for you?
I'm going to put my political hat on. If I could wave a magic wand, I think equitable funding is based on outcomes. So what results have RTOs had? Private, public, enterprise, any type of RTO. What are their completion ratings? What are their satisfaction levels when it comes to the outcomes of what they're delivering? And I don't know whether we have a system to properly measure that right now. We've got our VETMIS data and we've got quality indicators, but we need some sort of system that's more realistic with the outcomes. In particular, like I've got a number of clients that deliver training and they do have an 80 to 90% employment rate. But at the moment, we're not allowed to market that because that's under the standards. We're not allowed to state what our employment rate is. Can't guarantee job outcomes. But they've got the data that backs it up to say their students have actually got a job out of the training that they delivered. If we tracked and measured that following course completion, what are the employment rates from that? And we should be tracking and measuring that as a national data as well. Because, ultimately when it comes to government funding, they're funding training to get people into jobs. Why aren't we tracking what percentage are getting jobs?
So I guess one option for that then would be to give everybody the funding contract, no minimum amounts that we're guaranteeing to you, and then everything happens on kind of like a TNI sort of a basis. So for those that aren't familiar with New South Wales, there's a TNI process where basically you do a training needs analysis and then you put forward and go, right, well, this is the program that we've got. This is how we've successfully delivered it before. This is the outcomes that we're looking for. And then the department goes, okay, yep, cool, we'll fund you for that, right? Would that sort of a thing where literally like every RTO would get the funding contract, and then it would literally be, okay, but now we're going to work with you on like if you want to run a program, you've got to put it forward to us. You've got to see, and we're going to look at, have you fulfilled your promises before?
And I think it's their connections with job active providers, or they're called different names around Australia, but basically those providers that are trying to place students into work. Basically, they're trying to get them a job. It's your connections with them. It's connections with industry. How are you collaborating with industry, and how are you contextualizing your training to meet those industry needs? And then it's going into your community. So looking at your community and where are the skill shortages in your areas where you're delivering your training, and then what is the model that you've put together in order to meet that community need. Now, this might sound like a lot of work for a lot of RTOs, but I think they're a lot. Like, I know when I had my RTO, that's what I did. I worked with job active providers. I was actively meeting with them and asking them, what type of training do you need, and what are the outcomes that you want to achieve? And then I developed a program, a training and assessment strategy based on what were their requirements and what were their needs and their outcomes. And then I delivered training according to that, and we got their funding so they would place students into our training because we had written it exactly what they wanted. And I think that's where you'll have a better outcome. And that's where I don't know how that aligns with equitable, but it's you're addressing the problem by developing a program that addresses that problem and be able to demonstrate the outcomes.
Yeah. And I mean, and then I guess a lot of that then boils down to ensuring quality of it, just really boils down to the auditing of it. And I mean, certainly within the funded space, pretty much all RTOs are reporting monthly, right? I know one of the services that we do with our RTOs is we'll sit down on a monthly basis with them and go, okay, how many units do you have open? How long are your units being open for? What's the average time taking you to close? So like I've been working with one RTO recently, and initially when we came on board, it was taking them an average of about 400 days to close a unit. And I'm going, what's going on, guys, right? And so as we have been working with them, that's now come down in some of their programs to 84 days, right? Which is what and I mean, these are mostly traineeship and apprenticeship programs, which do tend to have like our their longer open times. But
they're not being paid if they're not finishing those units.
Every month we're monitoring those programs and we're going, okay, well, what's the number? What's are the numbers coming down and everything like that? And the first couple of times we started doing this with RTOs and sitting there with the CEOs and managers and kind of going, here is your data, right? They were like, this is amazing. And I was like, I know, but the shock of the RTOs kind of go, and I'm like, seriously, like I look at this stuff in my RTOs all the time. Like, I don't care what, yes, I get my staff's reports and all of that sort of stuff as to what I've done and, how busy I am and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, right, data runs my life. And I'm like, how many units did we close? How many units did we open? Why is trainer A doing 30% of the opens and closes than trainer B is? Like, what's going on there? Why does this trainer have, on average, 8 units open per student? I'm like, no, we do 3 or 4 at most, no more than 3 or 4 units open at a time. It confuses and overwhelms students. Get them to finish something before they open out something new. All of that data is available in people's systems, and people just don't use it. And when we start using it, all of a sudden RTOs go, oh my God. And I'm like, yes, look at this amazing tool for you to run your business, right?
And even the data we're required to collect, like VetMIS data and quality indicators, you can utilize that to improve your practices as well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we've just been doing our quality indicators. They're obviously due next week. So, we've been prepping our RTOs quality indicator reports. And in addition to doing the quality indicator report, we also give them an overview of, where everything is sitting at. So we don't just use the quality indicator reports. We use additional surveys. We use the complaints register. We utilize Google reviews. We utilize Facebook reviews, because a lot of RTOs are doing a lot more of that sort of stuff nowadays as well. And I mean, like, the stuff that we pick up, like, we went on to one RTO and realized, hey guys, you do realize, like, you haven't had any positive Google reviews in 2 years. You've got a student satisfaction rating of 90%. The 3 students that were unhappy with you went straight onto Google and had a whinge about it. But like, I've got 300 positive comments here, from your students from this year, saying how freaking amazing your trainers are. No one's responded to the 3 negative Google comments, like Google reviews that have been put up. And I'm like, what do you do? Like, and there's so much for RTOs.
And often that's where people are first going to go. They're going to do a Google search of your organization to find out.
Google review, Facebook review, Insta ratings, all of this sort of stuff. Like, it's, but unfortunately, I do think there's so many RTOs that don't know how to use their data. And you're right in that we're not collecting the data that we should be. That post-training employment stats. I mean, in an ideal world, are you employed when you graduate? Are you employed 3 months after you graduate? Are you employed 6 months after you graduate? And is that in the same field? Right.
Yeah. And did the RTO help you? Did the RTO help you to get that job?
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's a lot of RTOs that do.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, like, especially in qualifications where job placement is part of the overall training, or like, within the traineeship and an apprenticeship space, if a trainee, like, I know a lot of RTOs that advocate for the students to make sure that the employer is paying those fees, so that it, if you're paying an apprentice $13 an hour, and then you're forcing them to pay their own fees for their qualification, like the amount of RTOs that I know that have stepped in and kind of gone, oi, you're getting $8,000 for this kid to study with you. You're literally paying them $13 an hour. You're not going to have them, like, you are going to pay the fees for them. Like, I'm sorry, you are going to pay the fees for them. And I've had RTOs that have literally turned around and gone, we're not providing the training to you unless you're going to be the one that pays fees. You're not making this kid pay the fees, right? Yeah. But it's the RTO that stepped in to advocate that. It wasn't the ASIN, who, I'll be honest, I think the vast majority of ASINs are completely effing useless. Even though their whole job is to advocate for students, right? A lot of the times it is the RTO that goes in to advocate for them. I've had RTOs where the students come and disclose that, like, the employer is abusing them, and it's the RTO that's stepped in, or where, the student is completed and the employer is refusing to sign off on the student's trade certificate, and the RTOs had to step in at risk to the RTO, right? And go to the government and be like, seriously, the ASIN and the State Department need to go and say to them, this kid is competent. Like, this kid is competent. You have to start paying them as a proper tradie, right?
Yeah.
It happens in industry all the time, and there's so much work that RTOs are doing that goes unrecognized.
I'm going to do a sidestep here. It's still to do with government funding. Did you hear that Albanese recently announced that work placement will be paid by the government to any student doing nursing or any nursing related units witin university and TAFE?
Yes.
But
so this program was actually launched over a year ago. Actually, it might have been 2 years ago now.
But it's now in place now.
It's now actually come into fruition.
But it wasn't going to be TAFE. It was just going to be university.
It was just going to be for the universities. It's now just going to, it still will not be for any private provider students that are studying. It obviously won't support any of the international students to some extent. And actually, I'm not sure about that. If they're an international student in university, are they covered under this program?
Oh, I don't know. That's an interesting question.
I'm
I don't
going to
know.
have to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Guys, we're going to find out and we're going to drop it in the comments because if they are funding, if they refuse to fund a student who is enrolled with a private provider who is an Australian citizen, but they will fund an overseas student studying it in the internet in a university, I will call it. I will call it. Absolutely. I will 100% denote that. But yeah, I mean, look, for students that are studying in qualifications that are super desperately needed by industry, I'm all for providing some support for placement. Like those placements can be hard. Those placements, you often have to do weeks and weeks at a time. So you've got to give up your income in order to be able to go through and do this. And to me, if it's in an area that we desperately need support, so, nursing, some of the trades, aged care, things like that, where, we need more nurses, we need more carers, we need more tradies. I'm honestly for putting more money into all of those sorts of things because our nation desperately needs them. We desperately need more of these qualified people.
I think for
but
any
again,
of the skill shortages,
equity, it should be about, if it's in that particular area that we need, then let's fund it. I fully see the importance of the arts and everything like that. But if we have a limited bucket of funding, right, then at this particular point in our country, right, looking at where the world is and looking at the big challenges that we have, we should be putting money into whatever it takes to get more nurses, doctors, engineers, tradies, aged carers. That's what we need people working as, right? So the more people we can get doing that, and we need trainers who are able to teach people how to do that. So that's where we should be putting our money into, right? Is getting those things.
Yeah.
Because
it's also been
stupid shit all the time, and I don't understand why. We're great at wasting money.
It's also been noted that there's a high dropout rate for students who have to undertake work placement because they can't afford it. They can't afford to leave their other job while they're doing work placement. I know my son, he's completing RN. He's doing a university degree as a registered nurse. And every time he had to go do work placement, he was poor. He couldn't pay for his bills because he had to do his work placement and leave his paying job whilst he did that. So, and that causes a very high dropout rate. And we see the same when it comes to AIN, which is the assistant in nursing, which is a lot of the aged care, community services and disabilities. We see the same thing. They have to drop out or they can't complete their work placement requirements because they've got to get a paid job.
Welcome to the RTO Superhero Podcast, the show dedicated to empowering registered training organisations to navigate compliance effortlessly and deliver outstanding education. I'm your host, Angela Connell-Richards, CEO of Vivacity, where we believe that compliance should be a launchpad, not a limitation.
Yeah, and then a lot of them are just unfortunately in a position whereby they're going to be doing their placement during the day and they're going to be working a second job and a third job nights and weekends. So I did just do a quick search and it does look like international students are not eligible. So I will say there was some government rationality.
I did the same. So from 1 July, it's only for domestic students, not international, and it's teaching, midwifery, and social work placements.
Yeah, and look, we need. I mean, do we need more actual teachers? Is that a thing that we need? That's because of the high dropout rate that we get in teaching, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And school teachers are the same when they do work placement. That's when they get a high dropout rate.
Oh yeah, it's because you've got to do it for a whole term, so it's 3 months. I did my work placement. I was pregnant with Mikey. So I was smashing it at that particular point in time. I doubled up my work schedule to try and pop out the placement before I popped out the kid. But yeah, it's very full on. So I do support it in areas that we do desperately need it. I just think that we're really silly with how we use with how we use Australian dollars. Like our government just doesn't. And it's irrelevant. Look, I'm not going to say it's just Labor, because it's Labor, it's Liberal, it's, it is unfortunate that
I don't think it matters who's in government.
We have the people that we have that come and work from government in the vet sector. The last person that we had that seemed to me to be really passionate about helping all providers was Simon Birmingham. I loved him as a minister. He was super approachable. He had a very good level of respect for both the public and the private systems. He was really willing to listen, super willing to listen and understand what the problems and the challenges were.
And he actually understood education too.
Yeah, for sure. But he was the last minister that we had, and I'm definitely dating myself in saying that. But since then we haven't, and we have way too many both federal and state ministers who just have such a poor, the words dodgy RTO just falls out of their mouth. And anytime anything's positive, it's about TAFE. And I'm like, there is so much good that is done in our sector. Stop talking about we all know the problems are there. ASCOR is there dealing with the problems. I mean, how many qualifications have they cancelled? They are taking,
and RTOs have been shut down
at the moment, right? We've got RTOs being given $20,000 fines for not submitting their AVETness, right? At the moment, I've had so many RTOs approach me and be like, we got a $20,000 fine. We don't have any students. And I'm like, oh, dolls. Right? We've got RTOs being cancelled the moment that they don't do a year's worth of training, right? They've literally registered, and a year out, they're like, you haven't submitted your AVET. You've submitted in no AVETness. So therefore, we've taken your RTO registration from you. I'm like, oh, shit.
Meanwhile, we've had no government funding. We haven't been able to find any students. And now we've got a new legislative change, and we've got to update all of our documents. So we're a little busy right now.
Yeah, and then there's new training packages coming out. There's a whole new unit format coming out for those training packages. We're getting rid of performance elements and criteria, and elements and performance criteria. After that, we're going to have the AVETness change. After that, we're going to have the supposed AQTF change, which is actually probably never going to happen, but whatevs, right? RTOs deal with a lot, guys. Government, seriously, give us a fucking break. Just a tiny one. We work really hard. And we're trying to do our best. But we're
automatic registration cancelled just because you haven't had the students, and not even asking why, and what is the background. Yeah, it's just gone, bye.
God. Yeah, I've got RTOs that came to me when they got those letters a couple of weeks ago as to we know that you've put in your application. We know you've been waiting for 18 months. You're now going to have to agree to the new standards, or we'll give you back your $8,000. And I had providers sitting there going, we've paid $75,000 because we have to have a facility that we haven't been able to use. $8,000 means nothing to us.
And all the resources and the trainers and assessors.
$50,000 in this process. And I'm sitting there going, no, I know. I understand. They don't care. This is, they don't, I'm sorry, they don't care.
Unfortunately, the government do not know how to run a business. And I often see this where they just don't understand how an RTO runs, and that in particular a private RTO, where you've got to meet all of the other legislative requirements when it comes to industrial relations and WHS and go on and on and on, insurance and all that sort of stuff. and how they've got to manage all of that, as well as the marketing, as well as, building a brand for their RTO. They don't understand, like, yes, compliance is a component, but we cannot survive on compliance alone. As an RTO, there is so much more that we need to do.
Yeah, the only equivalent, so I keep chickens, right? Because I live in far north Queensland. I'm a crazy person that lives on farm now. So I keep chickens, and every time I introduce new chickens, right? We've got these little baby chickens that are running around, and they just get the crap kicked out of them, right? By all of the other chickens. So it's always the tiniest chicken that gets the hardest time, and I'm always like, you're like my RTOs, but they just keep on running, they keep on running and they keep on trying, right? But I'm like, you just keep getting the crap kicked out of you, you poor little things, and you just keep going.
That's such a good analogy. I like that.
Love you all so much. So yeah.
Before we close, I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
Is the narrative around TAFE as being the backbone of the vet sector outdated?
Look, okay, so that's a hard one for me, because I know in my heart you cannot take away TAFE, right? And you cannot take away private RTOs.
No.
But I feel when we say the backbone, right? If you have the bones there, but you don't have the muscle to then connect, and the tissues to connect all of the bones, it's useless. And that's exactly what private and public are like. You 100% need both. There is great, amazing training that happens in both private and public RTOs. We need public and private RTOs.
It's an ecosystem.
But exactly right. Without both of them being healthy, we start to see problems. And my concern is that I totally understand that for years there's been some real concerns that the numbers in TAFE are dwindling and everything like that. I don't think it means that we switch everything, and this is what governments in general do. And again, it doesn't matter what the government is. It swings super far in one direction, and so at the moment they're kind of going, oh, TAFE's in trouble, push everything towards that, and then you start to see the fact that our little private sector starts to dwindle and die, and we see beautiful we see beautiful little businesses that unfortunately just turn around and go, I'm out. It's all too hard. And then what happens inevitably is that the
TAFE
money then dries up. TAFE falls over because it can't cope, and the industries start to get really shitty because they're not getting the training that they need. And so, and then it swings, right? And then the government goes, oh shit. And the government swings. The only time I've seen it where it works well is where industry chooses to self-correct. And so my advice to RTOs at the moment is go and take your programs and go and talk with New South Wales TAFE and see if you can work out third-party arrangements, because I know they do it, right? All of the TAFEs do it. And my advice, if you're New South Wales TAFE and you're sitting here and you're going, holy shit, we've got a lot of money, we don't have the trainers, we don't have the facilities, go and talk with the RTOs in the regional areas where you don't have the trainers and where you don't have the facilities. And
you already have it.
Organize programs with those private RTOs. Guys, the only way that we're going to make this work, if we're relying on government to make this work, it ain't going to happen, right? Daddy government is not going to fix this problem, right? The only way we're going to fix this problem is if we go out and we implement the solutions ourselves. And that is, it's not about private versus public. It's not about TAFE versus whatever. We all need to be working together to help the students and industry get the outcomes that we need.
We need to collaborate together to have a better education.
Just like, RTO consultants don't need to war. We can all fight together. There's plenty of RTOs to save.
That's right.
It's exactly the same in the RTO market.
Yeah. And I love how we can collaborate and be able to discuss what's happening in the industry sector, having a total understanding of how it all works. And still we're not enemies, where we collaborate, and that's what the government needs to do with private providers as well as TAFE. It should be a collaboration where and I'm going to go back to that equitable funding. The equitable funding, how can we work together? I think that's the answer.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So there we go. We just solved the vet crisis, guys. RTOs, take our advice, and everything will be fine.
And what's next?
I'd like to talk about world peace.
Yes, maybe we'll solve that as well.
Yeah, I have a solution to that as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lauren, for joining me again today in the RTO Superhero Podcast. It's been fantastic talking with you again, and I love how we get to have this conversation and people get to join our conversation and hear two consultants experienced in the training industry talking shit.
Pretty much. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Let's do it again soon.
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on the RTO Superhero Podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Please check the show notes for the change.org link for the petition. The more we can get to sign it, the more we have a voice when it comes to what happens in our industry sector. Thank you. Bye for now. Awesome.
That was good.
Thank you for listening to the RTO Superhero Podcast. Ready to transform your compliance process? Discover Comply Hub, Vivacity's AI-powered compliance management system, designed to streamline your operations and give you peace of mind. Visit our website to learn more and schedule your demo today.